introduce them to programming and tech careers. I'm also the co-founder of a community group called NYC Tech Latinas. That's kind of a labor of love. We have monthly hack nights just to provide the space for Latinas in the tech industry in New York to meet each other and to have time to work on projects of their own.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Landon. I'm a director of programs at the New York Women's Foundation. We are a public foundation located in the financial district. That's been around for 30 years here in the city. We're the largest women's fund in the country and the third largest in the world. We do a lot of things, but as a foundation, one of our primary things is running a grants program for nonprofits throughout the city that work with low-income women and girls in a variety of different ways. Economic security is big for us in terms of developing skills and educational sets for low-income women to go on into a variety of careers. Tech is one of them, one of those industries where we support a lot of nonprofits doing this kind of work. One, for example, is Perscolas in the Bronx that trains women and low-income people in general for tech careers, and then other workforce development programs that may not be focused on tech, but do a lot of like technical skills training to make their skill sets relevant for today's job market. And we work with a lot of also emerging just women in general who want to become entrepreneurs in the nonprofit sector, start their own programs, start their own organizations to give them advice, oftentimes startup funding, TA support along the way, et cetera.
So I guess I got involved in this community 2 years ago. My background is in the arts. I'm a studio manager. I'm still involved in the arts. And my job needed me to know how to code. And I started going to events with women who code, and then started going to Girl Develop It events. And then I became a leader in the community. And for me, that was really powerful to be a beginner who knew how to. I had a professional career. I knew how to organize things. I knew how to organize people. I wanted to enter this new industry, and being able to connect with other women and other people and be at companies and see how people work, that for me made a huge difference, I guess with confidence, knowing that I could probably enter this field, being able to find projects to work on, people to work on them with. For me, that was very, very, very powerful. Yeah.
So I actually have, I studied computer science in college, and I was a software developer for several years. And then I went back to school to do my PhD in education, and I ended up doing my dissertation on teaching young Latinas programming. So I love programming. I really enjoy it. I've always been involved in tech, and introducing more students of color to technology has always been a passion of mine. I ended up volunteering a lot with Code Now, and it's so much that eventually they offered me a full-time job. And I said yes because I see myself in these students all the time. I discovered programming almost by mistake. It was like an elective in high school. I didn't know anything about computers. It sounded to be like the less boring of all the other electives, and I ended up trying it out and realized how much I enjoyed it. And so to be able to introduce youth all over the US, and especially those who come from underrepresented backgrounds, to programming, and then help them go on into careers in tech, because we have students now that are in college actually studying computer science. For us, that's like a big, big win. So that's really, really close to my heart. The other thing that I do, which is my labor of love, my Tech Latinas community. As a Latina in tech, I always felt like, you feel a little bit isolated and lonely, and you just want to have that community. And I started thinking about like, what are some of the needs that, as me personally, I have, and I'm pretty sure that if I have them, then other people like me may have them. And so just kind of like being able to have that community, people who understand where you're coming from and that you can talk to honestly and openly. And then having that, New York obviously is a difficult place to find space to work maybe on your own projects. So I just wanted to provide that space. And so this is what we do with our hack nights. We provide the space and a community for Latinas in tech to then come and work on projects of their own.
That sounds amazing. Can I go?
Yes,
okay.
Definitely.
So I kind of fell into the nonprofit world really much by accident. And I kind of started out thinking that I was going to be a classroom teacher and do ESL and bilingual stuff with students. I did it all throughout school. And I'd spent 6 weeks, though, in Central America between my junior and senior years in college. And when I came back, I'm from Connecticut originally and from New Haven. When I moved back to New Haven, the nonprofit that had sent me down there, which had an office in Connecticut and an office in Nicaragua, which is where I had worked, said the woman was leaving. It was a 2-person office in New Haven, a development person and an executive director. And the executive director was pretty much a catch-all for everything that wasn't the individual donation side of things. She said, I got a job at Yale. Do you want to take my job? And I said, I don't know how to do that. I was a sociology major. I minored in Spanish. I had never taken a finance course, anything about, strategic planning or working with how to work with a board. So I took it. I thought it would be a good opportunity. Sort of learned everything that I know about nonprofit management from having to figure it out myself, and did that for 2 years, and then went on to work at another youth development organization in New Haven, ran an AmeriCorps program there for high school and college kids to work as counselors in after school and summer programming for youth, and then decided I was really interested in program evaluation and these larger issues of where funding comes from and how it trickles down to communities and actually gets put to good use or not, and trying to mediate that so that everybody's happy while meeting everybody's goals. And so I moved to New York and went to NYU to do a master's in public administration, and then ended up at the foundation as a program officer, and now as a director of programs. So I think it's a good fit for me. I'm really passionate about a variety of issues around gender equality and equity, and just thinking about how a variety of identities around gender, race, class, et cetera, impact our experiences in life, and how, and particularly being on the funding side, how, again, we can use the money for good. And so I think, the foundation is a pretty progressive place in being able to fund a lot of innovative programs, but taking an innovative approach to leadership development, particularly for women, whether it's in tech, whether it's in other male-dominated fields, just like finance or healthcare administration, or construction and manufacturing. So tech is sort of one of the sort of industries that we think about how do we provide better access for women, low-income women, women of color, et cetera, in New York City. So it was kind of by accident, but I think it's a good place for now.
Yeah, so we had never met before a couple of days ago, and we thought that what we would really love to do with this session is to hear from you, to answer your questions, to find out what you want to know. So we all come from, we all have the same goal to support women in technology, but we all come at it from a slightly different perspective. So, yeah. Any questions?
I'm sorry, I just thought it was well rolling. Hi, I'm Holly. My question is, when you talk about nonprofit, I mean, we're all business people and we all have bills to pay and everything. I'm assuming that there's actually funding and that people who work in nonprofit get funded and all of that kind of stuff.
You both can start. Okay. Yeah.
So yes, that was a question I got a lot when I graduated college and I started working at a nonprofit, and I told people that I worked at a nonprofit. The first question I would get was, oh, so do you get paid? So yes, people in the nonprofit sector get paid. It's actually a large creation, a job creator in New York City and across the country. There's, hundreds of thousands of nonprofits that employ people. In New York State, I will say though, about over half of them, just around half, have operating budgets of $100,000 or less in any given year. So a lot of them are like really small startups, volunteer-run, low amount of cash to operate, very much volunteer-driven, either from like a founding ED or it's a working board, so the board of directors essentially staffs and does all the activities, or creates partnerships with people from the for-profit sector to utilize your in-kind skills and such to make the organization run. And some are really big. Like Perscolis is one that we fund that's pretty big. Another one we fund that you might know of is Year Up. They're rather large. They have sites all over the country, and some are just really small startup organizations that you might be literally operating on your block where you live, and you just don't even know because they're in somebody's basement, right? And so we, as a foundation, we fund people all across that spectrum. That's a good question, sort of to say is that, I can do like the show of hands thing. So can you like raise your hand if anybody here has actually ever worked at a nonprofit? Oh, okay. So we do have some nonprofit people in the room. Has anybody ever served on the board of a nonprofit? Yay, board service. Has anybody ever volunteered? That's pretty much every. So everybody's like done some type of volunteer services. Was this type of volunteering? Was it like you actually brought like a specific skill set around tech or something that's sort of like in demand, or was it like? Can I get a show of hands of that? Or was it more like I like stacked books or I painted, which is still good work. It's just a different type of volunteering. Like so, it's just so I think it's interesting from a point of view as somebody who's in the not-for-profit sector. I hear all the time from people like, how can I get more involved? We happen to do grant making in a special type of way in that we use a participatory grant making process we call it our Grants Advisory Committee. We actually recruit women from a variety of backgrounds, nonprofit, for-profit, graduate students, et cetera, women from the community, train them in how to review proposals and conduct site visits, and they actually make the recommendations for funding with us to the program committee of our board of directors, and those recommendations go on and get voted on in our docket, and that's how the money gets out the door. And so we did $6 million last year, and I oversee that process. And about 3/4 of that was done through this participatory process. So if anybody in the room, a woman, is looking to get more involved in that, come see me. I have business cards. We are recruiting for the upcoming fall sector. But what I tell people when they say things like, I'm going to quit my job and start a nonprofit because I'm feeling like, kind of bored in what I'm doing and I had a vision, or, somebody told me it was a good idea, or I saw something on CNN about somebody who's doing really amazing things in their community, and that could be me. That's great, and I totally support that. But I think there's some really serious questions about what level of involvement is sort of appropriate and what's needed. And there are tons of ways to get involved in the nonprofit sector without starting your own organization, so that's a whole other lecture and class course that could be given, because I will say, as somebody who talks a lot with people who are attempting to do their own startups, there's a lot of challenges and hurdles to that, and there's a ton of ways, whether it's board service or volunteering on an ongoing basis or just doing a one-on-one consultation, that you can be involved without having to change up your whole life and take on such a large venture.
So I could raise my hand to a bunch of those different things. I've worked at arts nonprofits where funding is precious and very difficult to get, but there are, you can start a nonprofit and do what you're passionate about and be a director and have a salary. Like, there's a business structure that you can develop, and you can have a career and pay your bills and be involved in nonprofits. One of the things that astonishes me about Women Who Code all the time. We are a nonprofit. We're based in San Francisco. All of our chapters across the world are run by volunteers. Our directors volunteer. Our leads volunteer. We have women who are evangelists. They volunteer. It's an amazing way to get involved, and it works. We have Seattle just had a conference that I heard was really amazing, and that was all run by volunteers. So I think when you also get this idea that galvanizes people so strongly, and when you are filling a need, people will come, people will volunteer themselves at your nonprofit. When you're providing value for your volunteers and you're providing value for the community, it snowballs, and it's really amazing to see.
I think I have a very similar answer to both of them. So if there is anybody else with a different question.
How do you guys get the women who you're teaching or getting involved in the tech world or the coding world? How do you ever make connections, help them make connections with the corporate world, and how, I know like if we're recruiting for technologists, finding more applicants for female technologists is like a big difficult thing somehow. And so I'm just wondering, like, the more places we can all plug into, the better. How do you have avenues for folks who are learning with you to then go and make connections to the corporate world?
My side project with Tech Latinas is really a community. So in being part of the community, you make connections with people in different industries. And definitely, if you are a recruiter and you want to be part of the community, of course, we're going to welcome you. we do ask you that you bring more than I just want to recruit your members, right? But it's...
We think about this a lot. The way that we find space to have our events is by being hosted by companies, all kinds of companies. Greenhouse IO is hosting an event that we're having next week. Capital One has hosted us. All kinds of companies are really eager to bring women into their offices. And one of the great benefits there to our members and also to that company is that you get to have a really easy way to have a good conversation with lots of women who are in technology, probably looking for jobs. We have a lot of women who are transitioning into a new career, and also a lot of women who are just graduating a boot camp and want to get started. One of our pushes over the last several months with Women Who Code has been Hire Women Who Code. Hashtag Hire Women Who Code. And we're having a series of events that are aimed at helping women get ready to be hired. And we do get a lot of messages on Meetup from recruiters. And we decided to kind of take control of the situation by having our own speed networking event. So we've invited companies to come. We've asked for a $25 donation to come have a seat at the table, bring a technical recruiter, bring somebody from HR, and meet a lot of qualified women, designers and developers at the beginning and middle stages of their career, and also at the senior level. So that's always on our minds, and that's how we decided to tackle it. And hopefully that becomes an event that happens more frequently. This is our first time, May 4th, giving it a go, yeah.
So this is like a slightly different take at that question, because I'm coming from more like the funding space as opposed to representing one specific organization where I'm working with women, right? I think I've noticed more of a trend for funders to take a more proactive approach and thinking that it's not enough just for me to fund your program to train women and not be sure that there's going to be a demand on the other side or an opportunity on the other side to employ that person in a living wage job for which they've supposedly been trained. So why do I put all this money to invest you for something, to get placed in something if you're going to end up making what, like a more minimum, closer to minimum wage job that would have been a lot cheaper for me to fund, right? Funders are often now using more of their going beyond money and the resources they have to proactively make those connections with different, on the demand and the employment side of the sectors ahead of time. To say, okay, you have this program over here. I'm leveraging my resources as a funder and the connections I have to say, this corporation over here, and we're actually going to fund this ahead of time, knowing that you all are entering into a relationship with each other. That can work really well. I think can also work really badly. Sometimes I think funders take too much of a directive approach to say, I've come up with the solution for you and the population you're working with, and here's the partner, and you're going to work together. And if you want this $100,000 on the table, that's what it's going to be. And the nonprofit has to make a choice. Really makes sense. Oftentimes maintaining these partnerships costs a tremendous amount of staff time beyond the actual ongoing things that you were supposed to do that year anyway, and now you have to spend like 30% of your time as the program director to create and manage and nurture and salvage this, like troubleshoot and triage this relationship with this other external partner because your funder wants it. And right, this is where women are supposed to go be employed afterwards, and that's the whole point. But sometimes it can work out if it's a good match, right, and it meets everybody's needs. So I've been noticing that a lot more. Walmart is one. This is like a completely different sector, but has just given an enormous grant to some place out in Chicago. This is more for the retail sector. Walmart has decided that they're very interested, in creating opportunities within the retail sector and low-income women on the ground and connecting them to jobs, not just for them, but for the sector in general. And so they're taking a very proactive stance, for example, in that. And there's other examples of that. But I think from the funding space, it's a tricky thing because it can work out really well, right, to create those connections ahead of time, but it can also get everybody into a difficult space.
I have one more thing to add to that. One of the kinds of events that we have lightning talks, and we recently started focusing our lightning talks on demo night, so we've made it about the work that the women in our community are making. And then what we try to do whenever we go to a company is get a woman who works there in technology to also to be the keynote speaker or to demo something that they're working on. And I recently heard we had a holiday party in December, and one of the women that participated in demo night now works at that company. And so those kinds of connections, because you're all there about work, you're really excited, you're passionate about what you're doing. I've seen that happen several times. So I think that's definitely, I mean, we're going to keep going with lightning talks, but I've seen that kind of organically happen.
I realize this is, sorry, my voice is not great today, and I realize this is a really big question, so don't feel that you need to give me a whole
I'll just pass the mic.
What do you think is the problem that you guys specifically are trying to solve with respect to getting women in underserved populations into technological careers?
That is a very big question.
I know. I'm wondering if you have like a relatively summarized answer.
I can say that what we try to
Encourage with the events that we have is giving women the tools to be confident applying for that first job or learning how to work as a team. That's one of the events that we're trying to work out right now, getting women to learn how to work remotely by actually giving them a project and leading them through that and mentoring them through that, making them confident speakers, you know, helping them to blog, helping them to have a really solid presence and figure out what their voice is, because they are going to enter into, they're going to enter into this economy and try to get a job, and that can be so terrifying. So being confident in your abilities, having been able to practice those abilities, having projects under your belt, and also having a network where you can go back and say, okay, like, was that crazy? Did I just have an interview that was completely bizarre? Or am I, like, what's going on here? Being able to have your voice heard and get feedback and have a sense that you're not just like adrift in the universe. That's what we try to focus on with a lot of our events, I guess, is building confidence, building powerful networks, and also building stuff so that you have it at your disposal.
I definitely think it's a culture issue. And so there are several things going on. First, like you said, is like being confident, right? Everybody knows about the whole thing where men will apply for a job even if they think they can only do 50% of it, and women, we think we have to be doing like 80-something% of the job in order to apply for a job, right? So being able to see ourselves and then put ourselves out there, also being able to speak up. And I think men do a better job at promoting themselves than women do. So there's that. The other thing is tech culture is not a very friendly culture, right? And so you're gonna go into this environment and it's hard, and you're gonna be doing all these like struggles. And I think that you need to find then a community and a network that can support you withstand a lot of those things. I went to an event once, and they said if we were to achieve equality, gender equality, it was an event for women in tech, right? And so if we were to achieve gender equality, would we then still need events directed just for women in tech, right? And my answer is like, we come together not because we're women in tech only, but because we like tech and we're women. So we like talking about tech issues. But I think that, and to me it's a little bit bizarre that we women, we actually need to get together to talk about the things that happen to us in the workspace, and men don't have that, right? So I think it's a cultural issue. I think that it seems like we're making efforts to changing. I think it's gonna take a long time, but I think in the meanwhile, we just have to be resilient, and we need to have the resources and the networks to be able to withstand this.
That's a good question. It makes me, so I'm going to be like the person that just talks about money, I guess, because that's where I work. And if you look at the nonprofit sector, the reality is that things that happen on the ground follow where the money is coming from and what the priorities of the money are. So I think it's a valid thing to think about. So we approach it, like I was saying, we think about the population of low-income women that are in New York City, right, and what they need. Our long-term mission is to move them towards this larger vision and framework around economic justice via them and their families. And we know that when you invest in a woman, you actually are more likely to create those things, say, at the familial level, versus than men in many cases, because of the role that women play as caregivers in their families, and the fact that both domestically and internationally, it's been shown that women use more of their income, right, for like family education and health purposes. So we have that concept of why invest in women in the first place. We've been particularly focused on low-income women that have had traditionally a number of barriers to a lot of sectors of industry for a variety of reasons, but this also applies to finance. It, like I said, applies to healthcare, applies to construction, et cetera. The reality is that for a long time in the funding world, this idea of women and workforce development were actually two very separate things, right? When you would think about, even I just posed the question, like, women's issues, what does that mean? Like, if you think of an RFP being released by a foundation to fund women's issues, like, what are you thinking they're gonna fund? The reality is, for many people, what comes to mind and what is in many funders' minds is also like reproductive health, pregnancy prevention, maybe some HIV education, as domestic violence. Like, those are women's issues in people's minds, I think, in like the general public still to this day. City money, government money, foundation money very much followed that for a long time. A lot of the money for many years that went into workforce development at the city, state, government level, for example, for many years, was sort of trying to address this, if you think about like low-income at-risk communities, was more geared towards men, with this idea that workforce development will be a way to keep people out of prison or keep recidivism low. It's really only been recently that people have thought of workforce development intentionally as a woman's thing. So, for example, at the city level, a lot of the funding that comes might be like one-off here and there, like discretionary monies from city council people, as opposed to money like baselined in the budget for specific hard-to-employ populations, like survivors of domestic violence, for example. So one of the things that we have funded a lot of is not just the direct service portion to make sure that work happens on the ground, but people advocating with these legislators to make sure that funding is stable, and that when the city releases RFPs, that they include a lot of these women-focused, like these, not just like ex-offenders, right, people with histories of criminal incarceration, but like survivors of domestic violence as a population that needs investment for workforce development purposes, because we know that if a woman has no option to keep herself economically stable and her family economically stable, she's not going to be able to live an independent life, and you can't really address one without the other. You can't. It's great to provide housing for a survivor. It's great to provide counseling, but she doesn't have a job, and it doesn't allow her to earn enough to support her and her family. Then she's just going to fall back into the same cycle. So we do a lot of thinking about how to, and we try to then say that if we can show that this works, then other funders will follow suit. So I think part of it's like the cultural conception. And I think for the funders, like if you know any funders, it's sort of challenging their conceptions about, what from a gender point of view, like what women's issues are.
Neil says we're cooked, but we have 2 minutes. I know that went really fast, right? One more thought. I mean, it sounds really something bad to say, like we're trying to solve this diversity issue, but we are, right? Like more voices, all of the voices, all different kinds of voices, building stuff for, building apps, building things that solve problems. And there's great diversity, it's women in tech, but within that group, there is so much diversity and there's so many different voices. And so helping them get in the door so that we can build really great stuff. Because that's like the women, we have all of these meetups and we talk about these issues and we talk about how hard it can be to be a woman in tech, but mostly we just talk about the really cool stuff we want to build. And so that's what gets us really excited. That's why we show up to lightning talks, is to show off the really awesome stuff we're building. But being able to make sure that we have a seat at the table, or that we're connecting with Latinas in tech or lesbians who tech or all of these different groups, and that maybe that goes beyond just technology. Maybe we're connecting with the New York Media Center or Beta NYC, groups that are thinking about solving other problems outside of just women in tech. I think that will, we'll get some really great stuff to happen. So.
So for all the nonprofit people in the room, if you're interested, I don't know if you know of the New York Women's Foundation, if you're interested in talking to us about, like, we do have RFPs, we oftentimes have funding opportunities, and you're interested in just talking to somebody, throw an idea off the wall, or just think about how to get your group, your organization more involved in the nonprofit sector in general through volunteer opportunities and such, please feel free to come talk to me.
So Code Now, we have workshops about every month. If you are a woman or man who does programming and would like to volunteer, we're always looking for volunteers. If you want to be part of our, connect with our community, NYC Tech Latinas, just look us up.
Ditto. I am here today with the co-founder of our chapter, Elizabeth Ferrao. So if you want to get involved with Women Who Code, you want to figure out, you have a meetup idea that you would love for us to offer to our attendees, or you just want to talk, come find us.